Hello and welcome to the NewWorldReview, your source for everything anime and manga, and today we are here for some cursey goodness as we examine the key differences between the Jujutsu Kaisen anime and the manga. Which, just to be clear, the Jujutsu Kaisen anime is really everything one could ask for of an adaptation, and the large majority of changes it does make are arguably for the better. Others can be more questionable, some are just plain censorship, and there's even a couple that are more than a little bit inexplicable. All of them are fascinating though. And we're going to begin this exploration with a quick round of Gojo Dojo, a very simple minigame, the rules of which are as follows. Within the Gojo Dojo, we have 3 challengers hoping to defeat the mighty Satoru Gojo. Now, of course, we, meaning you and I and everyone, know that this is going to be impossible, so instead it's going to be your job to guess which of these 3 challenges is going to get Gojo slapped right out of existence first. Should you guess incorrectly, then your punishment will be to subscribe to the NewWorldReview, thus forming a binding vow and allowing regular cursed content uploaded directly into your YouTube feed. Meanwhile, if you are correct, then you will be given a souvenir from Gojo's travels. Ho ho ho. So which challenger will fall first? Make your choice now and we shall reveal the answer in 3, 2, 1, and bam! It was Jogo. Poor, sad, soccer ball Jogo. So if you guessed incorrectly, then you know the thing to do, and please do say hi in the comments below if you are a new member of the New World Association. Welcome. But the reason why I chose to bring up Gojo first is because that's exactly what the anime decided to do. Probably one of the biggest changes that the anime makes to the manga is the order in which it chooses to show events. Sometimes the anime will opt to jumble up events and play them out of order, and other times it will take events that were presented out of order in the manga and present them in chronological order in the anime. It's quite fascinating really, but our key one here is that the anime opens up with the scene of Yuji and Gojo discussing the impending execution. So the series begins with a flash forward really, because this scene doesn't actually happen until chapter 2 of the manga. In fact, canonically the very first character shown in Jujutsu Kaisen is Fushiguro. However, I think that this is a solid change for 2 reasons. One, it immediately provides a hook for the viewers, whereas the manga, in my opinion, had a very slow, or like maybe not slow, but definitely a more humble start. It definitely didn't have me gripped from page 1. And there's this really insightful thing that Hirohiko Araki, the author of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, says in his book entitled Manga in Theory and Practice, where he states that the first page of any given manga series is by far the most important. Araki's philosophy is that it's the first page that needs to drive someone to want to read the next 10,000 pages. And the same theory can be applied to anime. It is that first minute of the anime that immediately sells the entire series of Jujutsu Kaisen in a far more effective way than the manga did, in my opinion. And then of course the second beneficial factor is that it allowed the anime to put Gojo in the first episode. And that man is a key selling feature of Jujutsu Kaisen all on his own, so a very solid idea there. Episode 1 also features one of the bigger changes of the series, which all has to do with how Yuji eats the initial Sukuna finger. In the manga, this is done with an almost startling level of casualness. Yuji and Fushiguro are facing off against the cursed spirit, and Yuji has the bright idea to give himself some cursed energy by eating the finger. And so out of completely nowhere and with no second thought, he just does it right then and there. In the anime, this is significantly more dramatic to say the least, because Yuji consumes the finger out of desperation because he is mere seconds away from being killed by the cursed spirit. So it paints Yuji as more of a last-ditch hero as opposed to the manga, which honestly makes him look a bit more like a moron. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing either. In fact, I really like the way the manga did it, simply because of the way that Gege Akutami subverted your expectations. Because you would think that Yuji is going to need to be pushed into that situation like he is in the anime before he makes that choice, but instead of that, he's just like, no need, I'm just gonna do it, just gonna casually put it in my mouth and it's done. And it does say quite a lot about Yuji that he would be so willing to do that so easily. In my opinion, I think that the anime is edging a bit too much on the drama here. In fact, it reminds me of every episode of Star Trek when the Enterprise is in trouble and it's about to blow up or something. There's always a character like Data counting down the seconds till everyone dies. And the crew absolutely never solves their problems until that countdown gets to 1 or 0. It's all artificial drama, and to be fair, that artificial drama, well, it works. That's what the Jujutsu Kaisen anime did. They had Yuji make his choice when he was down to 1 second away from death. As part of that, the anime also extended the action elements of Yuji versus the cursed spirit, which is a very ongoing feature in Jujutsu Kaisen. Most action scenes in the series feature a huge degree of elongation and can often be seen as Mappa just sort of flexing, saying, look at the cool things that we can do, which I'm actually pretty okay with. They can extend the action all they want, even if it does get a bit absurd like Fushiguro versus Sukuna, but it doesn't matter as long as it looks good and as long as it feels good. The one time where it may arguably matter is when these extensions change particular character traits, like say Mai versus Maki in the Tokyo Goodwill event. In the manga, after Maki catches the 7th bullet, Mai just concedes defeat, whereas in the anime, Mai has a little bit of a Mai tantrum, and then repeatedly tries to bash Maki with her gun, which is interesting because I guess it makes Mai look more irrationally desperate and emotional, but I also do like the manga portrayal of just having her collapsed in resigned failure because it plays her as wise enough to know better. But you know, the anime gives you that raw emotion, which equals more of the dramas, so I guess it just depends what kind of experience you prefer. It's not just combat that gets elongated, however, and one particularly horrifically dwelled upon scene is when Jogo burns up the restaurant. This event is almost instantaneous in the manga. One big fiery boom thing and it's all done. But in the anime, Jogo seems to combust people one by one, almost as if he's taking pleasure in the act of doing it. Like he's making sure not to consume his meal too quickly, because Jogo is a connoisseur and he needs to have it bit by bit so as to attain maximum enjoyment, which is super sinister, and I think it makes Jogo look a lot more blanket evil than he actually is, because it is one thing to want to eradicate humanity, to just pave the way for your new human cursed nature regime, but it's completely another to take pleasure in that task of eradication. Like, they're both bad, but one is definitely worse. Speaking of our nature-based spirits though, Hanami has an intriguing little difference in the anime, being that we can actually understand them, well sort of. Hanami's initial lines in the anime are spoken in this like backwards speak, so if you're quick enough or if you pause the episode, you can figure out what Hanami is saying, such as when they're speaking to Gedo in episode 7 saying, "We are the true humans after all," which is actually a very poignant insight at that point in the series, one that manga readers had no concept of. Because meanwhile, in the manga, these early instances show Hanami as being completely incomprehensible to the reader. We mainly get speech bubbles with what looks like these is sort of like hieroglyphics, and the only clues you really get are from the other side of the conversation, whoever Hanami is speaking to at any given time, which more often than not keeps things very deliberately vague. And this actually leads to a fairly hilarious situation during the Tokyo Goodwill event where Hanami encounters Inumaki, which is just great because they converse with each other but they're both speaking completely incomprehensibly. Hanami with their hieroglyphic talk and Inumaki just yelling random food. I love it, it's hilarious, so it's a shame that those little things get a bit lost in the anime, but at the same time a choice did need to be made, and speaking these initial lines backwards, yeah, that was fine. On the topic of choices, we are all familiar with Yuji's Jennifer Lawrence-based obsession, but there was a minor change in the anime in regards to the poster that Yuji puts up in his room. Seeing the woman, it's implied that this is meant to be a poster of Jennifer Lawrence, although in the manga, it's a poster of a completely different woman. Here we see a figure with clearly Asian facial features and black hair as opposed to the blonde, assumedly Jennifer Lawrence-ish figure of the anime. And it's pretty obvious why this change was made, because if you're going to have a character be obsessed with a certain celebrity, then the poster containing a different person is a bit of a missed opportunity in that regard. Minor changes like this are some of the most fun though, and one thing I immediately noticed when watching the anime were Yuji's glasses when he, Fushiguro, and Gojo went to pick up Kugisaki. In the manga, Yuji had these like tacky New Year's glasses that said 2018, and when I read that I was like, wow, this is gonna date the series, and given that the anime was being produced in 2020, it felt obvious that something like that was going to change. But instead of going with the 2020 glasses, maybe out of concern for the year that 2020 was around the world, the anime decided to give the scene a more timeless quality by making the glasses spell either the word rook or rock. It's kind of confusing, because if you look at the second O, it's actually separated, and this O may in fact be a C, thus spelling rock. But whatever the case may be, it's a meaningless word, and the change was just made to ensure that we're not setting a specific time period, I guess. But a fair few changes were also made in the anime for the purpose of censorship. Jujutsu Kaisen is actually a pretty shockingly violent series for a shonen manga, and there are times when Akutami's artwork is deemed a bit too graphic for the anime. One such occasion is when Hanami returns after the Tokyo Goodwill event, having been wounded by Gojo. In the manga, there is this very visceral depiction of Hanami's body just falling apart, and even falling out when returning to the super evil lair place. So the anime saw this and they went, yeah, let's not do that. And instead they decided to creatively censor it by crafting the strategic darkness around the wound, but also by changing the camera angle so that Hanami's initial appearance is front on instead of side on, thus conveying the shocking wound with all of the missing bodily bits, but without needing to show it as graphically as Akutami decided to. But on rare occasions, things in Jujutsu Kaisen are sometimes a little bit too hot for television, and in this case we now turn to the death painting Eso. In the anime, he's a pretty scandalous dude already, with his super tight black pants and whatever he's wearing on top. I don't know what you would call it. It's like some sort of nipple shirt, fabric designed to cover nipples and like nothing else. But when we contrast that to manga Eso, well, he's a bit more out there there to say the least, as there are no pants to be seen and lots to be seen instead of the pants. Like some very sensual leggings and a G-string that leaves nothing to the imagination. That's a bulge. And it's one of those cases where I just find it fascinating what you can get away with in manga designed for young teenagers, but not a television series intended for that exact same audience. But something that I love about Jujutsu Kaisen in general are the pop culture references that Akutami throws in, because Akutami and I were around the same sort of generational age group, and sometimes those references are not only hilarious, but also legitimately helpful. Without spoiling anything, there's a reference to Digimon in the manga that just like instantly made me understand that particular situation perfectly. I love it. And the anime also embraces this by expanding upon these references. For example, when Yuji is watching movies to train in the manga, it is implied that one of those films is Lord of the Rings. You just see his compelling gaze and we hear the dialogue on screen in which Frodo is clearly pining over Sam. But in the anime, they went and did a full-on parody of Lord of the Rings, showing the scene on screen, which I loved. But when Yuji is discussing cursed energy with Gojo initially, in the anime he claims that he wanted to perform a Spirit Gun, a Bankai Rasengan, and even a Dodon Ray, which are all references to very important media in my life. But crazily enough, this line is not actually in the manga. The anime decided to add this line, and it's actually one of my favorite in the entirety of Jujutsu Kaisen. I don't know why, I just really like Yuji weeping out. It makes him much more identifiable to me, and probably most people who read anime or watch manga, or the other way around. I mean, you can read anime if you want. I guess you do with subtitles. You could also watch manga, but the pictures aren't going to move for you, so it's probably a lost cause. But you get what I mean, because Yuji doing the things that we're doing right now to watch him doing the things makes him more identifiable. Wow, I really effed that whole section up, didn't I? But let's forget about all of that, because it's time for you to decide to watch another video like this one here. There is always more to learn, explore, and enjoy about Jujutsu Kaisen, so I look forward to seeing you there. And hopefully I'll be speaking properly, but I make no guarantees.